Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for your kind invitation to testify today and for your incredible leadership on this issue. I want to recognize, obviously, my colleague, Senator Whitehouse, who's been such a powerful force, not only dealing with Hurricane Sandy, but so many other issues in the state of Rhode Island. Later today, you'll hear from my colleagues in the House, Representative Langevin and Cicilline. They, too, have been actively engaged in weathering the storm and then dealing with the after effects. Rhode Island suffered significant damage. A major disaster was declared in 4 of our 5 counties, the south coast of Washington County, which includes the communities of Westerly, Charlestown, South Kingston, and Narragansett. Was pounded heavily over several tide cycles. Homes were uprooted, dunes were obliterated, sand was driven back into coastal ponds, through homes, onto local roadways, exposing underground pipes, septic tanks, and other utilities. And off the coast near Block Island, the Army Corps Coastal and Ocean Data System buoy recorded perhaps the largest wave of the storm, 47 feet. The island sustained severe road damage as well as damage to its docks. In Middletown, Rhode Island, the Rhode Island National Wildlife Refuge in Saturates Point received sustained and significant damage. It's isolated today. It can't be used because the one road, access road, has been obliterated. But despite this damage, we know the outcome for our state could have been far worse had the storm followed a slightly different track. And our sympathies remain with the families throughout the Northeast, so eloquently and passionately described by Senator Gillibrand, and I'm sure also by Senator Schumer, who've lost loved ones, who've sustained devastating damage, who are still recovering. All America, our hearts literally go out to them and to their representatives doing so much to help them. In Rhode Island and elsewhere throughout the region, we were able to limit some of the losses because we had time to prepare. So I want to acknowledge and thank the National Weather Service, which produced very accurate forecasts and gave emergency planners several days of advance warning. I also want to commend the Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency led by Teresa Murray, the Rhode Island National Guard commanded by General Kevin McBride, and local emergency planners for their work they did in warning the public and of evacuating areas with the highest risk. And I also want to commend our utility, National Grid, for the planning and the response. They did an extraordinary job with crews already assembled in Rhode Island before the storm. Throughout the response to recovery, the support from the federal government has been exemplary. Whenever the state asked for an emergency or disaster declaration, President Obama provided, often within hours of the request. Agencies were also quick to respond. Within a day of the disaster, Secretary Ray LaHood provided $3 million in emergency relief funding to open roads in the state. Now, as we consider efforts to support the recovery, I would note that this was the 3rd major disaster that has hit Rhode Island in as many years, reflecting this climate activity, which is unusual and I don't think will dissipate. We've had hurricanes in 2011, 2012, and a major flood in 2010. Each of these disasters has affected a majority, if not the entire state. The size and frequency of these events, coupled with a very harsh economic and fiscal climate in the state, have made it very challenging for Rhode Island to fund the portion of the recovery that they must fund. And for this reason, relief in the form of additional federal funding through disaster CDBG funding and economic development administration grants, as well as cost share flexibility for FEMA assistance, have been important to the state in the past and will be again very important for post-Sandy recovery. In addition, resources through the Department of Transportation's Emergency Relief Program will be essential to fully restore the roads damaged in the storm. As we move through recovery and into long-term mitigation, we should also be mindful of the long-term impacts and resiliency of our coast and the impacts of sea level rise and global warming. I believe that addressing these challenges will require the participation of the Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA, the U.S. Geologic Survey Service, FEMA, and so many other agencies. And I think the chairman has raised the right issue. This should be a turning point in our efforts to deal with these issues on a comprehensive basis, not on a particularized basis. There are smaller measures, however, that could be taken as well. In particular, we should not ignore the Army Corps' Continuing Authorities Program, the CAP program, as part of the response. This includes Section 103, small beach erosion, Section 205, flood control, and Section 206, environmental restoration. For states and communities with limited resources, these smaller scale projects can be enormously beneficial and effective, particularly after disasters. I appreciate the steps have taken in its draft reauthorization of the Water Resources Development Act to utilize CAP authorities for post-disaster assessment and projects. I also want to acknowledge the committee's efforts to increase the per-project cost limitations for some CAP authorities. These are positive measures that we should work to expand upon. Before I conclude, I want to note the role that previous federal investments have made in limiting damage. We often overlook prudent steps that are taken before a storm that pay off significantly. First, the Army Corps of Engineers Fox Point Hurricane Barrier. This project was built about 45 years ago to protect the city of Providence from storm surges, like those that overwhelmed Providence in the Hurricane of '38 and Hurricane Carol in '54. Over the last several years, the Army Corps has made significant investments to modernize the barrier, ensuring that it's been able to operate in events like Sandy and Irene. In addition to the investment through regular operations and maintenance funding, the infusion of resources under the Recovery Act has helped speed the repair and rehabilitation of the barrier. This has been very important in ensuring that it could continue to operate during major storms. Literally, without the Corps' intervention, we would have felt very vulnerable to the flooding of Providence with catastrophic effects. Second, on a smaller scale, a new culvert in Bristol, Rhode Island, as part of the flood control project funded by EDA and also part of the Emergency Supplemental Appropriations Bill of 2010, helped the town absorb damages. Otherwise, areas of that town would have been inundated, as they are in every storm, some even minor storms. So I hope that we follow through with the work of this committee to authorize and to give direction to not only remediation and response to Sandy, but long-term protection and restoration of our coastal waters and our coastal areas. Again, thank you, Chairwoman Boxer, for what you've done this morning and what you will do. And once again, I can only say to Senator Gillibrand, Senator Schumer, Senator Menendez, Senator Lautenberg, and others, our prayers are with you and your constituents. You've suffered grievously. Thank you.